Hey, I'm Jake, and for this video, I'm going to be explaining Ableton Live for Logic Pro X users. And by doing so, hopefully you'll be able to follow along my future Ableton videos without getting too mad at me. So, let's begin. Alright, so what you're looking at right now is the session view. And the session view is where Ableton gets credited for its popularity. If I had to explain what the session view is, it's basically the track alternatives feature of Logic Pro X on steroids. What it allows you to do is perform live, improvise, try different variations, and the different variations are the key element of what makes the session view unique in Ableton and how it's locked to the BPM of your project. So, in order to demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is show you how track alternatives work in Logic Pro X. So here we are, and this instrument, the classic UK hip-hop, has a few variations. And what I'm going to do now is show you the different variations and explain to you how this relates to Ableton Live. So as you can tell, as you can hear, the drums are a bit different each time I change it. And if I were to click these two arrows and say show inactive, you'll see that there are multiple MIDI clips, different variations of the drum grooves. So if I click this arrow over here, it shows a different groove that's highlighted in green, and so on. Now, Ableton is essentially the same. If I made multiple MIDI clips and made multiple instruments, right now you're not going to hear anything. I just want you to look at the interface. What you're going to find is that the MIDI clips turn green, and these are basically MIDI regions. So when you're watching my videos and you see me go into the session view, just know that I'm basically creating variations, whether I'm making a drum variation, a piano variation, or even song section variations like a full chorus. Now, how do I do that? Well, I use the session view, and if you look to the top right, there is a master channel. Under the master channel, you have a numerical order, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And every time I press the green, the triangle icon, it turns green and it locks to the BPM. So if I were to press this earlier for row 2, you'd see that the green lights would blink and it would sync to the downbeat. Here we go. And it syncs to the downbeat. All right. Now, this is really important for understanding Ableton, and it's one of those things that I think a lot of people get confused by. The other thing in the videos that I might be publishing is you'll see me go from track alternatives, or the session view, into arrangement. So let's break this down in Logic Pro X. I'm going to hide the track alternatives. If I were to duplicate this and say in this next section, I want the pattern to change, what I'd essentially do is show all the variations that I have and drag them in. Right? And now I'm starting to get a more personified arrangement, a more varied arrangement. Okay, Ableton is essentially the same way, except there's a key difference. You arrange it by rows. So in the master track, when you click 2 and you hold it and you drag out, it shows you these stop icons. And if I were to go to my arrangement view by pressing Shift, it then allows me to bring everything from the track alternative session view into the arrangement view. And that's a key element that you'll need to understand if you decide to watch some of my Ableton videos. All right. The next thing that I wanted to point out is that when you're watching these Ableton videos, you'll notice that you can group things, but it's a bit extreme. So in Logic Pro X, you can group things by making a track stack. A track stack is essentially getting these two instruments and routing it into a bus, and the bus is represented as sum 1 or sum 2, etc., etc. It's essentially a bus track. In Ableton, you have the same thing. They call it groups. So if I were to highlight the MIDI instruments, it could be audio as well, and if I pressed Command G, that creates a group much like the track stack in Logic Pro X. However, this goes a step further because you can create groups within groups. So if I were to do this again, there we go. And if I collapse them all, you can basically create a different method for organizing your tracks. So you guys might see that in the videos. Don't get too confused. It's just groups within groups. And the reason why I use this is because Ableton doesn't have as many send tracks, which are essentially their bus tracks. They only allow for 10. So we create group tracks, which are essentially the same. Now, when you are watching me mix, you will notice that I'll be pulling in plugins and mixing, but everything is from left to right. And this is really different. A lot of people, when they first see Ableton, they assume that this page over here, the session view, is the mixer view. It really isn't, and the mixer view is at the bottom right. It looks like this. Click this arrow. It's from left to right, and it's per channel. This is one of the weaknesses of Ableton, but, you know, it works. So what you might see in the videos is I will be grouping and mixing tracks like this, and that's essentially me bussing. So if you get too confused, just know that if you see this little square right here, it's essentially me creating a summing stack and putting all the plugins there, right? And I just collapse it and it shows up here. It's like grouping these guys. That's basically what this is. All my plugins will go here and my instruments. So I think everything else is pretty straightforward. This is the MIDI region. And if you do decide to learn Ableton for yourself, just remember that the one key shortcut that you want to learn is Shift $. Same thing with Ableton. If you drag your cursor anywhere in the UI, and if you look at the bottom left in Ableton, it will show you an information view. So it tells you or describes to you each key feature for where your mouse is pointed at. And the same thing happens in Logic Pro X. If I press Shift $, you'll see the help function icon turn on, and everything is explained. So I will just show you a little preview of what video I might be making. And the last point that I wanted to make is that I think all DAWs do the same thing. And the only reason why I've been using Ableton is because my Mac has been breaking for about a year. And I just had to buy a new one, but that's off tangent. This is what the next video might be. Alright, so in this video that I might publish later on, I'll go back and forth between the arrangement view, and you might get overwhelmed if you see a session view that looks like this, but just know that each top column is basically an audio channel or an instrument channel. You can see it says complete control here. Operator is like the ES2 for Logic Pro X. And the session view, just remember, it's basically track alternatives. So if I do publish Ableton videos, I hope you don't get lost, and I hope you enjoy the content, because I believe that making music with any software is the key thing to chase. So take care.